His secretary winked as she spilled coffee on my blouse. Oops. He likes me messy, she giggled, eyeing my husband like she owned him. At the board meeting, I walked in wearing a power suit and dropped the mic. Literally. I just bought 51% of the company. She's no longer his secretary. I promoted her to janitor. Enjoy the mop. His secretary winked as she spilled coffee on my blouse. The memory burned hotter than the scalding liquid that had soaked through my cream silk top just hours earlier. I stood in my walk-in closet, staring at the stained garment I'd flung over the hamper, still unable to process what had happened at Crawford Industries today. A company that once bore my DNA in every brick, policy and handshake was now a place where I, Ruby Crawford Hamilton, was treated like an unwelcome outsider. Before I continue my story about reclaiming my family's legacy, I want to thank you for joining me on this journey of rediscovery and empowerment. If stories about standing your ground and fighting for what's rightfully yours resonate with you, consider subscribing. It's completely free and connects you with others who believe in preserving what matters most. Now let's dive in. I ran my fingers over the row of power suits I hadn't worn in 15 years, each with price tags still attached. Impulse purchases for a return to corporate life that never materialized. Beyond them hung the faded photograph of my father and me standing before the original Crawford Industries building, a converted warehouse with a hand-painted sign. Dad's arm wrapped protectively around my shoulders, his weathered face beaming with pride as he held up the keys to our future. "Remember what matters, Ruby girl," Matthew Crawford would say, his voice like worn leather. "It's not about the money in the bank. It's about building something that outlasts you." My father started Crawford Industries in our garage with nothing but a second-hand drill press and unwavering determination. By the time I graduated college, the company employed over 200 people. Most from our neighborhood, many related to each other, all treated like extensions of our family. Dad insisted I learn the business from the ground up. Summer vacations meant working in shipping, then accounting, then sales. After business school, I became the youngest operations manager in the company's history. The employees respected me not because I was the boss's daughter, but because I remembered their spouses' names and asked about their children's baseball games. Because I brought homemade cookies to meetings and stayed late helping the cleaning staff when deadlines loomed. Because I was my father's daughter in more than just name. Then along came Bentley Hamilton, charming, ambitious, with a sales pitch that could seduce even the most reluctant clients. He joined our sales team and immediately broke company records. Unlike the other newcomers, he took time to learn our history, to understand the Crawford philosophy of business with a handshake integrity. Or so I thought. "You're the heart of this place," Bentley told me on our third date as we walked through the empty factory floor after hours. "Your father built something special, but you're the one who makes it beat." I believed him. I fell for his vision of us running the company together someday, continuing Dad's legacy while modernizing responsibly. Marriage came quickly, followed by our first child barely a year later. When little Matthew was born, my priorities shifted overnight. The company that had been my second home suddenly felt less urgent compared to the miracle in my arms. Bentley suggested I take a temporary leave. "Just until he's in school," he assured me, cradling our son. "The company will always be there. These moments won't." Dad raised concerns during our Sunday dinners. "Business is about consistency, Ruby," he warned, passing the potatoes. "Step away too long, people forget whose name is on the building." But I was sleep-deprived and in love with motherhood. Our daughter Eliza arrived 18 months later, and my temporary absence stretched indefinitely. Then came the stroke. One minute Dad was delivering a toast at the company picnic. The next he was unconscious on the grass, half his body suddenly betraying him. The following weeks blurred into a nightmare of hospital corridors and devastating prognosis. With Dad incapacitated and me overwhelmed with 2 toddlers in his medical care, the board unanimously appointed Bentley as acting CEO. "Just until things stabilize," the board chairman assured me, patting my hand like I was a child. "Bentley understands Crawford values." The first changes seemed innocuous. The company newsletter went digital to save trees. The annual Christmas bonuses became performance-based rather than equal across departments. The company picnic moved from the local park to an upscale country club. Each time I questioned a change, Bentley had a plausible explanation wrapped in business terminology that made my domestic concerns sound naive. "Margins are tightening, Ruby. We can maintain your father's values without clinging to outdated practices. 5 years after Dad's stroke, I visited headquarters to drop off homemade cookies for Admin Appreciation Day, a tradition Dad started decades ago. The receptionist, a young woman I'd never met, asked for my ID. When I mentioned I was Matthew Crawford's daughter, she stared blankly. I'm not familiar with that name. Is he in accounting? That night, I confronted Bentley over dinner. Nobody there even knows who Dad is anymore. Bentley reached for his wine glass, not meeting my eyes. We've had significant turnover, Ruby. You can't expect new people to know ancient history. Ancient history? Dad founded that company. His name is literally on the building. It's just business evolution. Nothing personal. But it was personal. Each subsequent visit revealed another piece of my father erased. The mission statement he crafted, quality, integrity, family, disappeared from letterhead. The wall of employee service awards was replaced with sleek digital displays showing stock prices. The comfortable break room where Dad hosted monthly birthday celebrations became a sterile collaboration space, with uncomfortable modern furniture. Last Christmas, the company party excluded retired employees for the first time in Crawford history. When Mrs. Abernathy, Dad's first bookkeeper, called me in tears after receiving no invitation, something inside me cracked. I drove to the assisted living facility where Dad now resided, his once powerful frame diminished but his eyes still sharp. He's changing everything, I whispered, holding his good hand. Crawford Industries doesn't feel like ours anymore. Dad squeezed my fingers with surprising strength. With labored speech, he managed 4 clear words that haunted me for months. Then take it back. I dismissed the idea as impossible. I'd been away too long. The board now consisted of Bentley's hand-picked allies. My corporate wardrobe gathered dust while I chauffeured teenagers and coordinated Dad's medical care. How could I possibly reclaim a company that had moved on without me? Then came today's coffee incident. Savannah Miller's calculated cruelty and my husband's dismissive response weren't just workplace drama. They were symptoms of how far Crawford Industries had fallen from my father's vision. As I fingered the stained blouse, Dad's words echoed again, then take it back. For the first time in 15 years I was ready to try. I woke the next morning with newfound determination, Dad's words still resonating, take it back. My first step would be reconnecting with the company, not as Bentley's wife dropping by with homemade treats, but as a Crawford asserting her presence. I selected a simple cream silk blouse and charcoal pencil skirt, professional but not imposing, and drove downtown to the gleaming glass building that had replaced Dad's modest brick headquarters 5 years ago. The security guard at reception didn't recognize me. I'll need to see some ID, ma'am, he said, barely glancing up from his monitor. I presented my driver's license, swallowing the bitter pill that once upon a time, every employee knew Matthew Crawford's daughter by sight. Mrs. Hamilton to see Mr. Hamilton, he announced into his phone after checking his visitor list. No, not on the schedule. Spouse visit. The word spouse carried the subtle weight of inconvenience. I was logged as a personal interruption, not a professional courtesy. The elevator doors opened to the executive floor, a space unrecognizable from my days as operations manager. Gone were the warm wood-paneled walls and family photos of employees' milestone celebrations. Everything was chrome, glass, and stark white, the air perfumed with something synthetic that reminded me of hotel lobbies. Even the lighting felt harsh, designed for alertness rather than comfort. Mrs. Hamilton. A young woman approached, moving with practiced efficiency in impossibly high heels. What a surprise. We weren't expecting you. Her smile revealed perfect teeth, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her badge identified her as Savannah Miller, executive assistant. She couldn't have been more than 26. With a sleek ponytail so tight it looked painful and a skirt so fitted it restricted her stride to tiny measured steps. Is Bentley available? I thought I might take him to lunch, I said, matching her polite tone while noting how she'd positioned herself between me and the hallway leading to his office. Savannah's expression flickered, almost imperceptibly, before regaining its professional veneer. He's in a conference call that should wrap up shortly. Why don't I get you settled in the waiting area? Can I bring you some coffee? The waiting area turned out to be a sterile arrangement of uncomfortable modernist chairs near the elevator. Not Bentley's office as protocol would dictate for the wife of the CEO. I'd been relegated to visitor status. Common. Sonal. Black, please, I answered, watching her retreat toward the break room. Through the glass walls, I observed her typing rapidly on her phone before preparing the coffee, her lips curled in what appeared to be amusement. Savannah returned with 2 coffee cups, handing me one while keeping the other, adorned with a perfect imprint of bright red lipstick, for herself. Mr. Hamilton should be free soon, she said, remaining standing though there were empty chairs. He's been under such pressure lately with the Anderson merger. I've been staying late most nights to help him manage the workload. The emphasis on nights wasn't subtle. Nor was the proprietary way she adjusted her blouse, drawing attention to the monogrammed cufflinks securing her sleeve, cufflinks I'd given Bentley for our 10th anniversary. I was contemplating this revelation when Bentley's laugh echoed down the hallway, that specific laugh he reserved for important clients and board members. Savannah's demeanor transformed instantly, her posture straightened, eyes brightening with anticipation. Bentley rounded the corner, engaged in animated conversation with 2 men in expensive suits. He faltered momentarily upon seeing me but recovered quickly. Ruby. What a surprise. He kissed my cheek perfunctorily before making introductions. Gentlemen, my wife. Ruby, these are the Anderson brothers, our newest acquisition partners. Savannah stepped forward with practiced grace. Your coffee, Mr. Hamilton, prepared just how you like it. She handed him the lipstick-marked cup with a smile that contained an entire private conversation. As Bentley accepted it, their fingers brushed in a touch that lingered 2 seconds too long. His wedding ring caught the fluorescent light, the same ring I'd placed on his finger 17 years ago when we'd promised forever. What happened next occurred in slow motion. Savannah pivoted toward me, coffee cup still tilted slightly forward. Her heel caught on nothing at all, a practice stumble, and suddenly hot liquid cascaded down my silk blouse, the brown stain spreading across the cream fabric like a Rorschach test of betrayal. Oh! Savannah gasped, eyes wide with manufactured shock. I'm so clumsy. Let me help you clean up. She dabbed ineffectually at my blouse with a tissue, managing only to spread the stain further. Then came the whispered words that confirmed everything wasn't just in my imagination. Oops. He likes me messy, she giggled, voice low enough that only I could hear. Her eyes flicked toward Bentley with unmistakable intimacy before adding, You should see his office after our late nights. I stepped back, coffee dripping onto my skirt as Bentley approached with a look of mild concern that never reached his eyes. Accidents happen, he said dismissively. Savannah, show my wife to the restroom, would you? Gentlemen, shall we continue in the conference room? Just like that, I was dismissed. An inconvenience to be managed while important business continued. In the bathroom, I blotted at my ruined blouse with paper towels, my hands trembling with a mixture of humiliation and rage. The door swung open, revealing an older woman in a Crawford Industries uniform. She froze upon seeing me. Miss Ruby? Is that really you? Through my tears, I recognized Margaret Peters, Dad's former executive assistant who had apparently been demoted to maintenance staff. Her once proud posture now stooped with age and perhaps resignation. Margaret? What happened to you? I asked, abandoning my blouse to grasp her weathered hands. Budget restructuring, she replied with a sad smile. Most of us old-timers got shifted around after Mr. Bentley's new team came in. Those who didn't take early retirement packages were reassigned. At least I still have health insurance for my Arthur's medications. For the next 15 minutes, Margaret filled in the gaps of my knowledge. How Bentley had systematically pushed out Dad's loyal employees, how Savannah had appeared 6 months ago and immediately established herself as untouchable, how rumors swirled about company funds being diverted to shell corporations with curious ownership structures. Your father would be heartbroken to see what's happening, Margaret whispered. The Crawford name means nothing here anymore except on letterhead. I straightened my shoulders, decision crystallizing. Do you still have access to company records, Margaret? Cleaning staff goes everywhere, sees everything, she replied with a knowing look. Nobody notices the woman with the vacuum. I need information, I said quietly. Financial records, board minutes, shareholder distributions from the past 5 years. Margaret nodded slowly. About time someone looked beneath the surface. Meet me tomorrow at Carlson's Diner, 7 a.m. Nobody from here eats at places without cloth napkins. As I drove home in my coffee-stained clothes, the humiliation transformed into cold, calculated resolve. This wasn't just about Bentley's betrayal or Savannah's cruelty. This was about my father's legacy being dismantled piece by piece. The company built on integrity was rotting from within. I made 2 stops on the way home. First to my father's attorney who had retired 3 years ago, then to the bank where Dad had established my trust fund, untouched since my wedding day. By nightfall I had assembled the beginnings of a plan. Crawford Industries might have forgotten who built it, but I was about to deliver one hell of a reminder. Carlson's Diner hadn't changed in 20 years. Same cracked vinyl booths, same coffee-stained menus, same smell of bacon grease and maple syrup. Dad used to bring me here for Saturday breakfasts before heading to the office. The familiarity was comforting as I slid into a corner booth at 6:45 a.m., ordered black coffee and waited for Margaret. She arrived precisely at 7, carrying a weathered leather briefcase I recognized as my father's old document carrier. Margaret had aged visibly in the years since Dad's stroke. Her once auburn hair now completely silver, deep lines etched around her eyes, but her posture remained military straight as she slid into the booth across from me. "You're taking a risk meeting me," I said quietly after the waitress poured her coffee. Margaret's laugh was dry as autumn leaves. "What are they going to do, demote me to cleaning toilets?" "Oh wait." He tapped the briefcase. "I've been gathering things for years. Didn't know why, just felt wrong throwing away the real Crawford history. Guess I was waiting for you to come back." She unlatched the case and passed me a thin folder. "Start with these board minutes from the last 5 years. Notice who's missing from attendance." I flipped through the documents, confusion mounting. "There are no Crawford representatives here except Bentley." "Your father's stroke was convenient for some people," Margaret said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "The board was gradually reconstructed. Your family's controlling interest became diluted through some complicated stock maneuvers. I'm no financial expert, but even I could see something wasn't right. But the company is still called Crawford Industries. We still own the majority shares. On paper, maybe." Margaret slid another folder toward me. "These are property acquisitions made by shell companies that, if you look closely enough, all trace back to a holding company called BHS Enterprises. Bentley Hamilton Securities. I guessed." Margaret nodded. "With an interesting silent partner, S. Miller Investments." "Savannah Miller," I whispered, the coffee incident suddenly taking on new dimensions. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated business partnership. "There's someone else you need to talk to," Margaret said, checking her watch. "George Whitman." The name hit me like a physical blow. George had been Dad's best friend, our chief financial officer for 30 years and my honorary uncle. He'd taught me to drive, attended my college graduation and given a heartfelt toast at my wedding. Then he'd suddenly retired 3 years after Dad's stroke. "I thought he moved to Florida," I said. Margaret shook her head. "Live's 20 minutes from here." Bentley spread rumors about early dementia to discredit him when George questioned some financial decisions. Last I heard, he was consulting for small businesses and avoiding anything with the Crawford name. She wrote his address on a napkin. "He's been waiting for this day longer than I have." I found George's modest ranch-style home in a quiet subdivision across town. The man who answered the door bore little resemblance to the robust financial wizard who'd once commanded our boardroom. His shoulders had collapsed inward, his former wrestler's physique diminished. But his eyes, those shrewd blue eyes that could spot a discrepancy in a financial statement from across the room, lit up with recognition. "Ruby Crawford," he breathed, enfolding me in a bear hug that smelled of pipe tobacco and aftershave. "My God, you're the spitting image of Matthew in his prime." George's living room walls were covered with photos of his life at Crawford Industries. Company picnics, retirement parties, the groundbreaking for our second factory. A visual timeline of everything that had been erased from the current headquarters. "I should have contacted you years ago," I admitted as he poured us tea. "After they pushed you out." "They didn't push me out," George interrupted sharply. "They framed me. Doctored financial reports with my signature, backdated transactions, created paper trails suggesting I'd misappropriated funds. When I started investigating, Bentley offered a choice: resign quietly with my pension or face criminal charges." My hands trembled around my teacup. "And you just left? Without fighting?" George's expression darkened. I fought in my way. Been documenting everything for years, building a case. But without board support or controlling shares, I was shouting into the void. He studied my face. Something's changed. You're here for a reason. I told him about the coffee incident, Margaret's documents, the obvious affair, and the troubling financial connections between Bentley and Savannah. George listened intently, then disappeared into his study, returning with a laptop and external drive. Operation Reclamation, he said with the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. Every questionable transaction, every violated bylaw, every instance of corporate malfeasance I could document. Plus something they don't know I kept. My original employment contract signed by your father, granting me stock options that were never properly cancelled. For the next 3 hours, George walked me through his meticulous documentation. The pattern was clear. Bentley had been systematically weakening Crawford family control while enriching himself and his allies. The company's foundational values hadn't just been abandoned. They'd been deliberately targeted for destruction. Why would he dismantle everything that made the company successful? I asked. Because principled companies are harder to strip mine, George replied grimly. Every decision your father made prioritized long-term stability over short-term profit. Bentley's playing a different game. Pump up value, extract resources, move on. Before I left, George made a call to Harold Jenkins, our former production manager who now worked for a competitor. By dinner time, I had meetings scheduled with 6 former Crawford executives who'd been pushed out under suspicious circumstances. A network was forming. People who remembered what Crawford Industries stood for and wanted justice. That night, after Bentley texted he was working late, the lie now transparent, I drove to the storage facility where Dad kept personal records. I hadn't visited in years, paying the fees automatically through his trust. The security guard recognized me immediately. He'd worked briefly in our mailroom decades ago. Inside the climate-controlled unit lay the physical history of Crawford Industries. Original blueprints, handwritten ledgers, photographs, and most importantly, filing cabinets containing incorporation documents and shareholder agreements drafted long before digital records could be manipulated. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, I discovered something Bentley had clearly missed. A provision in the original company charter giving the founder or direct descendants special voting rights under specific circumstances of suspected misconduct. The clause had never been invoked, but it existed in black and white, signed and notarized 40 years ago. I sat on the concrete floor surrounded by my father's legacy, a plan crystallizing with each document I examined. The company's quarterly board meeting was scheduled for next Thursday, just 9 days away. With George's evidence, Margaret's inside information and the network of former employees, I had a foundation. With Dad's legal provisions I had leverage. Dawn was breaking as I finally closed the storage unit. Exhausted but clear-headed, I drove to the assisted living facility where Dad resided. Though his stroke had limited his mobility and speech, his mind remained sharp. I needed his blessing for what would come next. He was awake, watching sunrise paint the sky outside his window. When I entered, his good eye focused intently on my face, recognizing something had fundamentally changed. I found it, Dad, I said, taking his hand. The way back. The way to save Crawford Industries. I outlined my discoveries and plans in simple terms, watching his expression closely. When I finished, Dad squeezed my hand with surprising strength. With effort he formed 4 clear words. You are my legacy. In that moment, standing in the golden morning light with my father's approval warming me, I made my final decision. Crawford Industries wouldn't just be reclaimed, it would be reborn. The clock that had stopped 15 years ago when I stepped away began ticking again, counting down to a reckoning no one at that gleaming glass headquarters could possibly anticipate. 9 days. The countdown to the quarterly board meeting ticked relentlessly in my mind as I drove home from Dad's facility. 9 days to orchestrate a corporate coup while maintaining the facade of an oblivious housewife. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years I'd played the role Bentley expected, and now that very underestimation would be his downfall. My first call was to Erica Patterson, Dad's longtime attorney who had retired shortly after Bentley took over. Now running a small practice specializing in corporate governance, she listened without interruption as I outlined what I'd discovered. The founder's provision is legitimate, she confirmed after reviewing the documents I'd photographed. It's unusual but not unprecedented. A safeguard against hostile takeovers that was common in family businesses of that era. The question isn't legality but leverage. How many shares can you access? My trust fund held 15% of Crawford Industries stock. Significant but not controlling. George's improperly cancelled options represented another 3%. Margaret had quietly held on to 2% gifted by Dad years ago. The retired executives in my fledgling network controlled small percentages that collectively might reach 7%. We need 34% to invoke the founder's provision, Erica explained. And we'll need ironclad evidence of misconduct to justify using it. I spent that afternoon in Erica's office, mapping out potential allies and obstacles. By evening we'd identified a crucial target. Douglas Fletcher, the oldest-serving board member who had been Dad's banker for decades before Bentley relegated him to a symbolic role. Fletcher controls 8% through his family investment firm, Erica noted. And from what I hear, he's been increasingly uncomfortable with Bentley's direction. Our strategy took shape. I would approach Fletcher with George's evidence, appeal to his history with Dad and secure his shares for the vote. Meanwhile, Erica would quietly contact other minority shareholders who'd been sidelined in recent years. At home I maintained perfect normalcy. When Bentley returned that night, I greeted him with a gentle kiss and no mention of the coffee incident. During dinner, I listened attentively to his complaints about incompetent middle management, while silently identifying which loyal employees I would reinstate after the takeover. "You seem different," Bentley remarked, studying me over his wine glass. "More present." I smiled, channeling 15 years of acting experience as the supportive wife. "Just trying to take more interest in your work. I've been thinking about Dad's legacy lately." Something flickered in Bentley's eyes. Caution perhaps. "Matthew's condition hasn't changed, has it?" "No, just reflective, I guess. The kids are practically grown. Maybe it's time I found something meaningful to do with my days." Bentley's relief was palpable. "You should take a class. Join a charity board. Something fulfilling but flexible." His tone made clear what he meant. Something that wouldn't interfere with his life or career. The next morning, I met Douglas Fletcher for coffee at an out-of-the-way cafe where Crawford employees wouldn't venture. At 72, Fletcher remained sharp, his handshake firm as he assessed me with banker's calculated eyes. "You look like Matthew in his prime," he said, the exact words George had used. Same determination around the mouth. I presented the evidence methodically: the shell companies, the diverted funds, the systematic dismantling of Crawford values. Fletcher listened without comment, occasionally making notes in precise handwriting. When I finished, he closed his leather portfolio slowly. "I've known something was wrong for years. Couldn't prove it, and my protests were consistently outvoted." He fixed me with a penetrating stare. "What exactly do you want from me, Ruby?" "Your proxy at the board meeting next Thursday. And your word that you'll keep this conversation confidential until then." Fletcher considered for a long moment. "Matthew saved my bank during the savings and loan crisis when everyone advised him to pull his accounts. Said he valued relationship over interest rates." He nodded once, decisively. "You have my proxy." Day by day our coalition grew. A retired vice president pledged his shares. So did a former plant manager. 3 regional sales directors who'd been pushed out during restructuring eagerly joined our cause. By day 5 we controlled 29%, tantalizingly close to the threshold needed. Meanwhile I lived a double life with increasing difficulty. While preparing family dinners I took coded calls from Erica about stock acquisitions. While doing laundry I studied corporate bylaws. While Bentley slept I emailed strategic documents to our growing team of allies. The charade nearly collapsed on day 6. I was reviewing confidential financial records in my home office when Bentley returned unexpectedly from work. I barely had time to switch screens before he appeared in the doorway. "What are you working on so intently?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Planning Dad's 75th birthday," I lied smoothly. "The assisted living facility is helping coordinate something special." Bentley frowned. "That's months away. You know me, always the overplanner." I closed the laptop casually. "Bad day at work?" Fletcher's being difficult about the Anderson acquisition. Suddenly questioning every detail like he's relevant again. Bentley poured himself a scotch from the small bar in the corner. And someone's been accessing old personnel files. IT flagged it this morning. My pulse quickened. Margaret had been using her cleaning staff credentials to gather information. Probably just a system glitch. Probably. Bentley studied me over his glass. You visited your father yesterday? I visit him every week. You know that. Savannah thought she saw your car near headquarters afterward. The question hung unasked between us. I manufactured a laugh. Downtown after visiting hours? I was at Sarah's book club. Call her if you don't believe me. Thank God I'd actually asked my friend to cover for me if needed. The moment passed, but I knew our window was narrowing. Someone had noticed the unusual activities. Margaret texted a warning the next morning. Security protocols had been heightened, badges were being checked more rigorously. On day 8, Erica called with triumphant news. We've got 32%. 2% short but gaining momentum. That same afternoon, Fletcher called with a problem. Hamilton knows something's happening. He's called an emergency executive session before the main board meeting, trying to push through the Anderson merger before anything can interfere. We needed one more ally. Someone with significant shares and courage to stand against Bentley. Someone he wouldn't suspect. The answer came from an unexpected source. Bentley's younger brother Timothy, George suggested during our final strategy meeting. He inherited 5% from their grandmother but never takes an active role. He and Bentley haven't spoken in years. Some dispute over family property. Would he help us? I asked. George's smile was wolfish. Bentley blocked his application to work at Crawford straight out of business school. Said nepotism would look bad, right before promoting his college roommate to vice president. The night before the board meeting, I made the pivotal call to Timothy Hamilton from a burner phone. He listened silently to my proposition, asked 3 incisive questions that confirmed his business acumen, then simply said, "Email me where to sign." With Timothy's shares we controlled 37%, enough to invoke the founder's provision and force a comprehensive vote on leadership. The final evening I stood before my closet contemplating the battle uniform for tomorrow's war. The power suits still bore price tags, preserved in plastic for a return to corporate life that had never materialized. Until now. I selected a charcoal gray suit with subtle Crawford blue pinstripes. Dad's favorite color, incorporated into every company logo until Bentley rebranded with sleek silver. I laid out crisp documents in my briefcase. Original papers from Dad's storage unit, George's meticulous evidence, partnership agreements, proxy authorizations. Then I added one final touch. Dad's old fountain pen, the one he'd used to sign the original incorporation papers 40 years ago. In the bathroom I studied my reflection as I applied subtle makeup and styled my hair into a professional updo. The woman in the mirror wasn't the comfortable housewife who'd spent 15 years on the sidelines. This was Ruby Crawford re-emerging, the heir apparent who'd once known every employee's birthday, the operations manager who could recite production numbers from memory, the daughter trained from childhood to lead. "Who are you talking to?" Bentley asked from the bedroom, hearing my whisper. "Just myself," I called back. "Finalizing plans for Dad's appointment tomorrow." Another lie, but the last one. By this time tomorrow, truth would be the new currency at Crawford Industries, and its rightful guardian was ready to take her place. Morning arrived with crystalline clarity. I'd barely slept, but adrenaline provided all the energy I needed. Bentley had left early for pre-meeting preparations, his kiss on my cheek perfunctory, distracted. He had no idea it was goodbye. I dressed methodically, the charcoal suit with Crawford blue pinstripes, a simple white blouse, my mother's pearl earrings, low heels that wouldn't compromise my mobility or confidence. The woman in the mirror looked both familiar and strange. The girl who had once been Matthew Crawford's heir apparent now matured, tempered by years of silent observation. The Crawford Industries headquarters gleamed in the morning sun as I parked in a visitor spot. This time I didn't approach the front desk or announce myself. George waited by the service entrance, employee badge clipped to his jacket. "Margaret cleared our access," he whispered, ushering me toward the freight elevator. "Security protocols were changed last night, but she has a friend in IT who made sure our credentials still work." We rode silently to the executive floor, emerging into an empty corridor. The boardroom was 3 doors down, the same room where Dad had conducted quarterly meetings for decades, though now redesigned with sleek minimalism that erased its history. Through the glass walls I could see the meeting already in progress. Bentley stood at the head of the table, laser pointer circling figures on a projection screen. Savannah sat near him, taking notes with exaggerated diligence. Board members in expensive suits listened with varying degrees of engagement. Fletcher checking his watch, Timothy Hamilton examining his fingernails with studied indifference. "Ready?" George asked softly. I nodded, clutching Dad's fountain pen like a talisman. We entered without knocking. The pneumatic door hissed open, creating an instant vacuum of silence as heads turned toward the interruption. Bentley froze mid-sentence, laser pointer still illuminating projected revenue forecasts that I now knew to be manipulated. "Ruby." Confusion flickered across his face, quickly replaced by irritation. "We're in the middle of a meeting." "I know exactly what you're in the middle of, Bentley." My voice was steady, authoritative, a tone I hadn't used in 15 years. "And I'm here to stop it." Savannah recovered first. "Mrs. Hamilton, should I call security to escort you out?" Her sugary concern couldn't mask the panic in her eyes as she noticed George standing behind me. "That won't be necessary, Miss Miller." I moved to the center of the room, placing my briefcase on the table. "This is, after all, a family business. And I'm family." Fletcher cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should hear what Ruby has to say." Bentley's smile was strained as he addressed the room. "My wife has been under considerable stress lately. Her father's condition." "My father would be appalled by what you've done to his company," I interrupted, my words landing like stones in still water. "Fortunately, he built safeguards into the very foundation of Crawford Industries. Safeguards I'm invoking today." I removed the original company charter from my briefcase, sliding it toward the center of the table. Article 7, Section 3. In cases of suspected corporate malfeasance, the founder or direct descendants may call for a comprehensive leadership vote with special weighted voting rights for founding shares. Timothy Hamilton leaned forward, poorly concealing his smile. "I believe that requires significant shareholder support." "It does," I agreed. 34% to be precise. I placed a stack of proxy statements beside the charter. "I control 37% as of this morning." Bentley's face drained of color. "That's impossible. You only have 15% through my trust," I finished for him. "Plus George's improperly cancelled options, Margaret's holdings, several retired executives' shares, Fletcher's family investment block, and," I paused for effect, "your brother Timothy's 5%. Timothy raised his coffee cup in mock salute as Bentley's head whipped toward him. "You wouldn't," Bentley hissed. "Already did." Timothy shrugged. "Family loyalty, something you might want to study up on." Savannah shot to her feet. "This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in and—" "Actually, she can," Fletcher interrupted, pointing to the charter. "I've reviewed the provision. It's legally binding." The next 30 minutes unfolded with surgical precision. George presented evidence of financial irregularities, including documentation of the shell companies controlled by Bentley and Savannah. Fletcher confirmed that funds had been diverted from employee pension accounts. Timothy revealed that the Anderson merger would have triggered massive executive bonuses while devaluing existing shares. Throughout it all, Bentley's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally desperate calculation. When the evidence presentation concluded, he attempted one last stand. "This is a witch hunt based on outdated sentimentality," he argued. "Crawford Industries needed modernization to survive. Without my leadership, this company would have collapsed years ago." "Interesting perspective," I replied, opening the final folder from my briefcase. "These are the true financial projections for the last quarter, not the manipulated versions you've presented to the board. The company has been profitable despite your asset stripping, not because of it." The vote was swift and decisive. Using the weighted founders provision, my 37% translated to a controlling interest. Within minutes, Bentley was removed as CEO, pending a full financial investigation. An interim leadership committee was established with Fletcher as chairman and me as acting CEO. Bentley stood frozen as his corporate kingdom collapsed around him. "You planned this all along," he said softly, dangerously. "All those years pretending to be content as a housewife." "No," I corrected him. I trusted you all those years. Until last week when your secretary winked as she spilled coffee on my blouse. Oops. He likes me messy, she giggled, eyeing you like she owned you. Savannah's face flamed as heads turned toward her. That moment crystallized everything wrong with what you'd done to Crawford Industries, I continued. It wasn't just about our marriage. It was about the legacy you were destroying. Security arrived to escort Bentley and Savannah from the building. As they reached the door, I made one final announcement. Miss Miller, you're not fired. The surprise on her face was almost comical. Crawford Industries has always valued loyal employees. You'll be reassigned to facilities management, effective immediately. Margaret will show you where to find the cleaning supplies. After the meeting adjourned, I stood alone in the boardroom, emotions finally catching up to me. The victory felt hollow without Dad witnessing it. My marriage was over. My children would have questions I wasn't sure how to answer. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter. Mom, what's happening? Dad just called sounding weird. Reality crashed down. Corporate coups made for clean narratives in business journals, but messy aftermaths in real life. I'd reclaimed my birthright but lost my partner of 17 years. Right or wrong, necessary or not, there would be collateral damage. I spent the afternoon in meetings with department heads, many of whom regarded me with suspicion born from years of Bentley's leadership. Some were relieved, others resistant. All needed reassurance that Crawford Industries wouldn't undergo yet another traumatic transition. We're not tearing down, I told them. We're remembering. Quality, integrity, family. Those aren't outdated concepts. They're competitive advantages when applied correctly. By evening, the press had gotten wind of the leadership change. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, family, friends, and lawyers. I ignored them all, driving instead to the assisted living facility where Dad waited. The sunset painted his room in amber light as I entered. He was awake, alert, somehow sensing this wasn't a routine visit. I knelt beside his chair, taking his hand in mine. It's done, I said simply. Crawford Industries is ours again. Tears pooled in his good eye. With tremendous effort, he lifted his hand to my cheek in a gesture of both pride and comfort. He understood the cost of today's victory. He'd always understood that true leadership required sacrifice. Worth it? He asked, the two words clear despite his impaired speech. I thought of the company culture that would be restored. The employees who would be treated with dignity again. The business practices that would once more prioritize quality over quick profits. The legacy that would continue for another generation. Yes, I answered, squeezing his hand. Worth everything. As darkness fell outside his window, I described my plans for the company's future. Plans that honored its past while embracing necessary evolution. Dad listened intently, occasionally nodding or squeezing my fingers in approval. Tomorrow would bring complicated conversations with my children, divorce attorneys, and resistant executives. The road ahead contained both restoration and reinvention. But tonight, in the quiet of my father's room, I was simply a daughter who had kept her promise to protect what mattered. The Crawford legacy was safe once more. And I was finally home. If you enjoyed Ruby's journey of reclaiming her family's legacy, please hit subscribe and the notification bell to never miss another story. Drop a comment below sharing what you would have done in her situation. Thanks for reading. My husband changed his phone wallpaper, from our wedding photo to a bikini pic of his assistant. I found out when he handed me his phone by accident. I smiled, airdropped a video to the room TV. Him and her, in my condo, recorded by security cams. His parents were watching. His mom gasped. His dad stood up, then slapped him. The champagne was chilling in the refrigerator, Sinatra played softly in the background, and the scent of rosemary roast chicken, Lincoln's favorite, wafted through our modest suburban condo. Our 5th anniversary dinner needed to be perfect. 5 years of marriage, 3 apartments, 2 promotions, 1 dream home, and countless promises. I smoothed down my navy dress, the one he said brought out the gold flecks in my eyes, and reached for my phone to check the time. Bella, have you seen my phone? I think I left it on the counter. Lincoln called from upstairs, his voice carrying that slight edge of impatience I'd become so familiar with lately. I'll look. I called back, scanning the kitchen countertops until I spotted his sleek black phone beside the salt and pepper shakers. As I picked it up, the screen lit up with notifications and my breath caught in my throat. Where our wedding photo had been, that perfect sunset shot of us laughing on the beach, was now Caroline, Lincoln's assistant in a tiny red bikini, posing on what looked like a hotel balcony. Her long blonde hair blowing in the breeze, her smile aimed directly at the photographer. My husband. Before we continue with Bella's journey, I want to thank you for joining this raw exploration of betrayal and reclamation. If you connect with stories about women who refuse to be victims, who use their intelligence and strength to take back their power, consider subscribing. It's completely free and you'll never miss another story of transformation from devastation to self-discovery. Now let's see how Bella's perfect life began to unravel. My fingers turned to ice around the phone. The room suddenly felt too bright, the music too loud. I stared at the image, blinking slowly as if that might change what I was seeing. Caroline had been working for Lincoln for just under a year. Young, ambitious, with a marketing degree and what my husband had described as fresh ideas for the advertising agency where he was creative director. "Did you find it?" Lincoln called again and I heard his footsteps on the stairs. With practiced composure, the same I used in courtroom proceedings when opposing counsel threw unexpected evidence my way, I placed the phone back exactly where I'd found it, screen down. "It's on the counter," I said, amazed at how steady my voice sounded while my internal world collapsed into rubble. Lincoln entered the kitchen, all 6 feet of him in pressed slacks and the blue button-down I'd given him last Christmas. He smiled. That crooked smile that had once made my heart race for entirely different reasons than it was racing now. "Thanks, babe." He grabbed the phone casually, pocketing it without checking the screen. "The chicken smells amazing." I watched him pour himself a glass of water, studied the familiar movements of his hands, the wedding band still firmly in place. In that moment, a strange clarity washed over me. 10 years as a corporate attorney had taught me one crucial lesson. Never show your hand too early. "Your parents are still coming at 7, right?" I asked, reaching for wine glasses as if this were just another Thursday evening. "Yep. Dad texted earlier that they're looking forward to it." I nodded, calculating rapidly behind my practiced smile. Easton and Hazel Thomas. My in-laws of 5 years. Easton, the respected circuit court judge. Hazel, the retired elementary school principal. Both adored their only son, their golden boy who could do no wrong. Over the next hour, as Lincoln showered and I put finishing touches on dinner, my mind worked with cold precision. The image on his phone wasn't just a betrayal, it was evidence. And if there was one piece of evidence, there would be more. That night, during dinner with his parents, I observed Lincoln like he was a hostile witness. The way he checked his phone under the table. How he mentioned Caroline's name twice in professional contexts that seemed unnecessarily detailed. The slight flush on his neck when Hazel asked about his upcoming business trip to Chicago. 3 days later, under the pretense of increasing neighborhood break-ins, I had a security company install cameras in our condo. Lincoln barely noticed, distracted by an urgent project that kept him at the office until 9 most evenings. "It's this new campaign for Mitchell Breweries," he explained, loosening his tie one night when he finally came home. "Caroline and I are having to rebuild the entire concept from scratch." I nodded sympathetically, playing the role of supportive wife while my phone silently recorded every camera feed from our home to a private cloud account. The following Tuesday, Lincoln texted that he'd be working late again. I ordered takeout, poured a glass of Cabernet, and settled onto our sofa with my laptop. 4 hours I sifted through mundane footage of empty rooms and hallways. Until 2:17 p.m. The front door opened. Lincoln entered first, laughing, followed by Caroline, wearing the same red dress she'd had on in the office party photos on the company website. They were supposed to be at a client meeting across town. I watched, paralyzed, as my husband led his assistant through our home. The home I'd decorated, the home I paid 60% of the mortgage on with my attorney's salary. When they reached our bedroom door, I slammed the laptop shut. My wine glass tipped, spilling dark red across our cream-colored rug like blood from a wound. I didn't move to clean it. In the following weeks, I became a ghost in my own life. I attended partners' meetings at my firm, drafted contracts, met with clients, all while gathering evidence with detached precision. Security footage timestamps matched against Lincoln's late meeting texts. Credit card statements showing dinners for 2 at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel charges on days he was supposedly at conferences. I cataloged it all in a password-protected folder labeled Anniversary Video. A darkly fitting title for what I was compiling. The evidence mounted day by day while outwardly, I remained the same Bella Thomas. Competent attorney, devoted wife planning a special 5th anniversary celebration with her in-laws. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal, though that burned like acid through my chest at unexpected moments. The hardest part was maintaining the facade, asking about his day when I'd already watched footage of where he'd actually been. Lying beside him at night, wondering if he was dreaming of her. Washing sheets that carried evidence of betrayals I'd witnessed through cold, digital eyes. One night as I reviewed new footage showing them in our kitchen, her sitting on the granite counter I'd insisted on during our renovation, him standing between her legs. Something inside me hardened into resolve. The anniversary dinner with his parents wasn't just an opportunity for exposure. It was necessary justice. I would not crumble. I would not scream or throw things or fall apart like characters in the movies. I would use every skill I'd honed in 10 years of legal practice to present my case flawlessly, with Lincoln, Caroline, Easton, and Hazel as my captive jury. And when the verdict came down, I would walk away with my dignity intact, leaving behind nothing but the shattered illusion of the perfect life we'd pretended to build. The morning after my decision, I woke up beside Lincoln feeling like I was wearing someone else's skin. His arm draped casually across my waist as if he had every right to be there. I slipped from beneath his touch, careful not to disturb his sleep, and headed to the shower where I could let silent tears mix with the water streaming down my face. 10 minutes to fall apart, then the mask would go back on. Big case today? Lincoln asked over coffee, noticing my extra professional charcoal skirt suit. I smiled, stirring cream into my mug. Deposition for the Westlake merger. Might run late. The lie slid easily from my lips, though I'd never been dishonest with him before his betrayal began. No problem. I've got that client dinner with the Mitchell Brewery's people anyway. I nodded, mentally cataloging the information. There was no client dinner on his shared calendar, which I'd checked obsessively that morning. Another thread to pull. At work, I closed my office door and pulled out a leather-bound journal I'd purchased specifically for this purpose. Red, ironically, the color of both passion and warning. Inside, I began documenting everything. Dates, inconsistencies, patterns in Lincoln's behavior. The legal pad format I'd used throughout law school now served to build a case against my own marriage. Tuesday, said client dinner with Mitchell Breweries. Called office, no dinner scheduled. Credit card charge at Riverpoint Hotel Bar, $78. Wednesday, working late, but location tracking shows car at Caroline's apartment complex from 7:40 p.m. to 11:15 p.m. Thursday, anniversary gift receipt in pocket diamond earrings, $1,200. Not for me. Week after week, the journal filled with clinical observations, each one a paper cut to my heart. The woman who documented these betrayals and the woman who smiled at Lincoln over breakfast became increasingly separate entities. One was gathering ammunition, the other was maintaining necessary cover. You seem distracted lately, my colleague Megan noted over lunch one day. Everything okay at home? Just anniversary planning, I replied, the practiced smile appearing instantly. 5 years is a milestone, right? The double life wore on me. Each morning I applied makeup carefully, concealing the shadows under my eyes from nights spent reviewing security footage. I laughed at Lincoln's jokes during dinner parties with our friends, all while mentally calculating how to access our financial records without arousing suspicion. My opportunity came when Lincoln mentioned a 3-day conference in Boston. One I promptly verified was actually happening, though whether he'd be attending remained questionable. The morning of his departure, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. With trembling hands, I logged into our joint banking portal. We maintained separate accounts for our salaries but shared one for household expenses and occasional joint purchases. I scrolled through 6 months of statements, taking screenshots of every suspicious transaction. Woodland Jewelry, $1,247.98. Weekend reservation at Lakeside Inn, $689.73. Carolina Wine Imports, $312.50. Caroline's favorite vineyard, according to her social media. Each discovery was meticulously added to my growing file. I wasn't just collecting evidence of an affair anymore. I was documenting financial infidelity as well. Lincoln was spending our shared resources to finance his betrayal. That same day, I took the calculated risk of adding 2 more hidden cameras. One in our bedroom closet where he often took private work calls, and another angled toward our bathroom door. The existing cameras had captured them in common areas, but I needed comprehensive evidence. Every legal instinct warned about invasion of privacy, but my wounded heart overruled professional caution. "How was Boston?" I asked when Lincoln returned, his overnight bag dropping in our entryway. "Exhausting. Back-to-back sessions on digital marketing trends." He kissed my cheek and I fought the urge to wipe away the touch. "How about I take you to dinner tonight? Make up for being gone." I smiled, nodding. "That sounds perfect." While he showered, I checked the location history on his phone, which I'd figured out how to access weeks earlier. The blue dots showed his movements clustered around downtown Chicago hotels, nowhere near Logan Airport or Boston. Another entry for my journal. The dual existence became almost normal, watching him lie to my face, accepting it with a smile, then documenting everything once he left the room. I became an expert actress, laughing at appropriate moments, initiating intimacy occasionally to avoid suspicion, all while silently building my case. One night, Lincoln reached for me in bed, his hand sliding along my hip. I didn't recoil, though everything in me wanted to. Instead, I played my role, responding to his touch while my mind catalogued the mechanics of our interaction. The performance was convincing enough that afterward, he fell asleep with his arm around me, completely unaware of my detachment. As our anniversary approached, I began planning the revelation with the same attention to detail I devoted to preparing crucial witness testimony. The dinner would include his parents, Easton and Hazel, who had always treated me like a daughter. Their presence was crucial. Lincoln valued their opinion above anyone else's. The timing needed to be precise. After dinner but before dessert, when everyone would be relaxed but still alert. I practiced controlling my breathing, rehearsed potential responses to his inevitable denials, and prepared myself for the shock on his parents' faces. The security footage was edited into a 3-minute compilation, short enough to maintain impact, long enough to be undeniable. Nothing explicit but damning nonetheless. "Mom and Dad are looking forward to Saturday," Lincoln mentioned casually, 3 days before our anniversary. "Dad's bringing that 20-year scotch he's been saving." "That's thoughtful of him," I replied, picturing Easton's face when he would see what his son had been doing. Would he still want to toast our marriage then? The night before the dinner, I stood in our kitchen rehearsing my composed facade one final time. Tomorrow the performance would end. The evidence was irrefutable, the plan meticulously crafted. 5 years of marriage would conclude in a single evening of revelation. As I chopped vegetables for tomorrow's dinner, Lincoln came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Happy almost anniversary," he murmured against my neck. I leaned back against him, playing my part one last time. "It's been quite a journey," I replied, my voice steady despite the thunder of truth waiting to break loose. Indeed it had been. A journey from love to betrayal to calculated revenge. And tomorrow at precisely 8:15 p.m., the mask would finally come off. The morning of our anniversary arrived with golden autumn sunlight streaming through our kitchen windows. I'd been awake since 4:30 a.m., unable to sleep with the knowledge of what the evening would bring. The irony wasn't lost on me, preparing a celebration for the end of a marriage. I moved through the kitchen with methodical precision, chopping herbs for the roast, preparing the marinade for Lincoln's favorite garlic butter potatoes, and setting the table with our wedding china. Each motion felt like a scene in a play, the devoted wife preparing a special meal, though the script was about to take a dramatic turn no one but me anticipated. Lincoln came downstairs around noon, freshly showered and smiling. "Need any help?" he asked, dropping a kiss on my cheek. "I've got it covered," I replied, my voice steady. "Could you pick up the wine?" Easton mentioned wanting that Cabernet from Willowbrook Vineyards. "Sure thing," he said, grabbing his keys. "Can't wait for tonight. 5 years with the most beautiful attorney in Chicago deserves a proper celebration." As the door closed behind him, I allowed myself a moment of weakness, gripping the counter until my knuckles whitened. 5 years. 300 pieces of evidence. One devastating video waiting on my phone. By 6:30 the condo smelled of rosemary and garlic. I'd changed into a simple black dress, appropriate for both a celebration and a funeral. The dining room sparkled with candlelight, our wedding portrait watching over the scene like a cruel joke. The doorbell rang at 6:55 p.m. I took a deep breath, checked my reflection in the hallway mirror, and opened the door to Easton and Hazel Thomas. There she is. Easton boomed, pulling me into a bear hug. At 68, the retired judge still maintained the commanding presence that had once made attorneys tremble in his courtroom. Happy anniversary, sweetheart. Hazel embraced me next, her perfume enveloping me in a cloud of lilac. We brought gifts, she whispered conspiratorially, holding up elegant silver gift bags. And scotch, Easton added, producing an expensive bottle. Where's that son of mine? On cue, Lincoln appeared from the kitchen, embracing his parents with genuine affection. Something twisted painfully in my chest watching him. The charming son, the doting husband, knowing what lay beneath the facade. Dinner progressed with practiced normalcy. I served the courses, poured the wine, and participated in conversations about neighborhood developments and Lincoln's recent work projects. The Mitchell campaign is really taking off, Lincoln explained, swirling his wine. We've got some innovative strategies in play. All thanks to that assistant of yours, Hazel said innocently. Caroline, right? You mentioned she's been instrumental. I watched Lincoln's face carefully. The slight tightening around his eyes, the momentary pause before responding. The whole team's been great, he deflected. Speaking of great teams, Easton raised his glass. Here's to 5 spectacular years for these two. Lincoln, you couldn't have chosen a better partner. I know, Lincoln agreed, reaching for my hand across the table. I allowed his fingers to intertwine with mine, feeling nothing but cold determination. After clearing the dinner plates, I excused myself to the kitchen, ostensibly to prepare dessert. Instead, I took 30 seconds to steady my breathing and retrieve my phone from its charging station. The video was queued up, ready to airdrop to our television. There would be no turning back. When I returned to the dining room, Hazel was in the middle of a story about Lincoln's childhood accomplishments. He was always so focused when he wanted something, she was saying. Remember that science fair in 8th grade, Lincoln? You worked for weeks on that project. Speaking of memories, I interjected smoothly, placing strawberry cheesecake, Lincoln's favorite, on the table. We still haven't shown you the photos from our trip to Lake Geneva last month. Lincoln smiled, clearly relieved by the change of subject. They're on my phone somewhere. Why don't you show your mom? I suggested. I think she'd especially love the sunset shots from the boat tour. As he reached for his phone, I casually picked up mine. Actually, I have some better ones. Let me put them on the TV so we can all see them properly. No one questioned this. We often shared photos this way during family gatherings. I tapped a few buttons, connecting to the smart TV mounted on our dining room wall. My heart hammered against my ribs as I selected the file labeled Anniversary Special. I put together a little slideshow, I explained, my voice surprisingly steady. Just some highlights from our 5 years together. The screen flickered to life. The first image was indeed from our wedding. Lincoln and me on the beach, laughing as waves crashed behind us. His parents made appreciative noises. Lincoln smiled, reaching for my hand again. I withdrew my fingers just as the image changed. The timestamp appeared first, 2:17 p.m. Tuesday, September 23rd. Our living room came into focus. The front door opened. Lincoln's smile froze on his face. The footage showed him entering our home, Caroline following close behind. Their laughter was muted but visible. His hand on the small of her back. Her fingers in his hair. What is this? Lincoln's voice cracked. He lunged for the remote control, but I'd already moved it out of reach. Easton and Hazel sat motionless, confusion giving way to horrified understanding as the footage continued. Lincoln leading Caroline toward our bedroom. Bella, turn it off, Lincoln hissed, standing now, his face drained of color. That's just the beginning, I replied calmly, though my heart raced. There's more. Kitchen counter footage from last Thursday. Shower footage from Monday morning while I was at court. Oh, and my personal favorite, you two on our anniversary weekend last year when I was visiting my sick mother. Hazel's gasp seemed to echo through the room. Her hand covered her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Easton remained perfectly still, his face darkening to a dangerous shade of red. These are time-stamped, documented, and backed up, I continued in my most professional courtroom voice. as are the financial records showing gifts purchased for Caroline on our joint account. The hotel receipts. The text messages. Lincoln stared at me, then at his parents, then back at the screen where the evidence of his betrayal played on in damning clarity. Lincoln Thomas. Easton's voice was barely recognizable, a guttural growl I'd never heard from the typically composed judge. What have you done? The storm I'd been preparing for had finally broken. As Lincoln stammered through desperate explanations, I stood watching the destruction with a strange sense of detachment. 5 years of marriage disintegrating before my eyes, yet all I felt was the quiet satisfaction of justice finally being served. Easton Thomas rose from his chair with the deliberate slowness of a man fighting to maintain control. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of his fury. Lincoln backed away, hands raised defensively. "Dad, I can explain," he began but never finished the sentence. The crack of Easton's palm against Lincoln's face echoed through our dining room like a gunshot. 5 years of practicing law in Chicago's most cutthroat courtrooms hadn't prepared me for this raw display of parental disappointment. Lincoln staggered backward, his hand moving to his reddening cheek, shock written across his features. "Don't you dare call me that right now," Easton growled, his voice trembling with rage. "Your mother and I raised you better than this." Hazel remained frozen in her seat, tears streaming silently down her lined face. Her fingers clutched the edge of our dining table, the mahogany one we'd found at that antique store in Michigan during our second anniversary trip. The strawberry cheesecake sat untouched, its perfect surface now an obscene reminder of the facade we'd been living. "It's not what it looks like," Lincoln tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. "Caroline and I, it's just work stress. A mistake. A one-time thing that got out of hand." I let out a small hollow laugh. "One time, Lincoln, I have footage spanning 8 months. 73 separate incidents in our home alone." The precision of my documentation seemed to hit him like physical blows. His eyes darted between his parents and me, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. The footage continued playing silently in the background, a ghostly chronicle of betrayal that no one could look away from. "Turn it off," Hazel whispered finally, her voice cracking. "Please, Bella." I nodded and pressed pause but didn't disconnect the screen. The frozen image of Lincoln kissing Caroline in our kitchen hovered like an accusation. "When?" Easton demanded, still standing over his son. "When did you become this person?" Lincoln sank into his chair, suddenly looking decades older than his 35 years. "It just happened," he mumbled. "We were working late, drinking, celebrating the Mitchell account. 8 months ago," I supplied helpfully. "Around the time I made junior partner. While I was working 16-hour days to advance my career, you were advancing your relationship with Caroline." I moved around the table, retrieving a manila folder from the sideboard drawer. My hands didn't shake as I laid out printed screenshots of text messages, credit card statements, hotel receipts. Each piece of evidence meticulously organized by date. The attorney in me couldn't help but appreciate the thoroughness of my case. "Diamond earrings," I pointed to one receipt. "Charged to our joint account the day after I won the Westfield case. Weekend at the Lakeside Inn while I was visiting my mother in the hospital. Dinner at Giovanni's, where you proposed to me on her birthday." Lincoln didn't touch the papers. His gaze remained fixed on some invisible point beyond my shoulder, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "This is why you've been so distant," Hazel said softly, her initial shock giving way to painful understanding. "All those family dinners you canceled. The holidays when you were too busy to visit. Caroline needed me," Lincoln said weakly, as if this explained everything. The words hung in the air for 3 excruciating seconds before Easton exploded. "Needed you? Needed you?" His fist came down on the table, causing the wine glasses to jump. "Your wife needed you. Your family needed you. We welcomed you into our home at Christmas while you were carrying on with. He couldn't finish, overcome with disgust. I'd never seen Easton Thomas at a loss for words in all the years I'd known him. The former judge who could deliver hour-long opinions without notes was now stammering with rage. "I was going to end it," Lincoln tried again, an edge of whining desperation entering his voice. "After the Milwaukee conference next month. I was going to break it off with Caroline and recommit to our marriage." That was news to me, another lie to add to the mountain between us. I studied my husband's face, searching for any trace of the man I'd fallen in love with 10 years ago. The college boyfriend who'd written me poetry during finals week. The fiancé who'd surprised me with sunset picnics. The newlywed who'd whispered dreams of growing old together. He was a stranger now, this panicked man crafting flimsy excuses in our imploding dining room. How convenient, I said coolly. And what about the trip to Cancun you booked for Caroline's birthday next month? The one you paid for with airline miles from our joint account. Lincoln paled. How did you? I'm an attorney, Lincoln. Gathering evidence is what I do. Hazel stood suddenly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I can't be here right now, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I need air. She moved toward the door with unsteady steps. Easton looked torn between following his wife and continuing to confront his son. Parental instinct won out, and he gave Lincoln one last withering look before going after Hazel. Don't you dare leave, he commanded his son. We're not finished. In the sudden quiet after the front door closed behind them, Lincoln and I faced each other across the ruins of our anniversary dinner. 5 years of marriage reduced to forensic evidence and security footage. How long have you known? He asked finally, his voice small. Long enough to be certain, I replied, feeling oddly detached from the pain that should have accompanied this conversation. Long enough to prepare. Lincoln reached for my hand across the table. I withdrew it before he could touch me. Bella, please. We can work through this. Couples therapy. A fresh start. I'll cut all ties with Caroline immediately. I stood, smoothing the fabric of my black dress. Your parents will be back soon. I'm going to pack a bag and stay at Megan's tonight. You're leaving. Panic flooded his features. Now. Like this. Did you think I'd stay? I asked, genuine curiosity in my voice. Did you think I'd watch that footage and then just... What? Forgive you? Pretend it never happened. I love you, he said desperately. One mistake shouldn't erase 10 years together. 73 mistakes, I corrected him. In our home alone. I moved toward our bedroom, pausing at the threshold to look back at the man who was still legally my husband. Don't follow me. You have enough to deal with when your parents return. Upstairs, I packed efficiently, toiletries, work clothes, important documents. The overnight bag I'd prepared days ago sat ready in my closet. As I zipped it closed, I heard the front door open and Easton's voice rising again in the living room. I slipped out the back door, my car keys clutched tightly in my hand. The cool October air hit my face like a blessing, washing away the suffocating atmosphere of deceit that had filled our home. As I drove away from the condo, from the marriage, from the life I'd thought was real, an unexpected feeling washed over me. Not grief. Not rage. Not even heartbreak. Freedom. Megan's spare bedroom became my sanctuary for the first week after the implosion of my marriage. 7 days of ignored calls from Lincoln, concerned text messages from Hazel, and a single voicemail from Easton that simply said, "We're here when you're ready, Bella." My colleagues' quiet support, coffee waiting by the bathroom door each morning, take-out dinners with no pressure to talk, gave me space to process the seismic shift in my reality. You can stay as long as you need, Megan offered on the 8th morning, leaning against her kitchen counter. But you should probably go back to work before Peterson assigns your cases to someone else. He was right. I'd taken a week of emergency personal leave, but hiding away wouldn't solve anything. The law had always been my anchor, the one thing I could trust when everything else proved uncertain. I'll go back tomorrow, I decided, feeling a flicker of my old resolve returning. Time to face the music. The law firm of Baker, Peterson and Walsh fell silent when I walked through the glass doors Monday morning. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Eyes tracked my progress down the hallway toward my office. News traveled fast in Chicago's legal circles, especially news involving a respected judge's son and a junior partner with a promising future. Ted Walsh, one of the founding partners, appeared in my doorway before I'd even set down my briefcase. "Bella," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Got a minute?" In his corner office with its view of Lake Michigan, Ted didn't waste time on pleasantries. Lincoln called the firm. Twice. Said you've been unreachable and he's concerned. I met Ted's gaze steadily. "I'm separated from my husband, Ted. Not incapacitated. The Henderson acquisition documents will be on your desk by noon." A hint of approval flickered across his weathered face. "Good. And the Robertson deposition?" Scheduled for Thursday. I've prepared all the exhibits. Ted nodded once, satisfied. Divorce is messy, Bella. But it doesn't have to be professional suicide. Keep performing like you always have and this firm will have your back. The conversation was classic Ted Walsh. Blunt, practical, and mercifully devoid of prying questions or unwanted sympathy. As I returned to my office, the whispers resumed, but I walked with my head higher than when I'd arrived. 2 weeks after the anniversary dinner, I finally returned to my condo. Lincoln had moved out at Hazel's insistence, temporarily staying at his parents' suburban home like a teenager grounded for missing curfew. I changed the locks anyway. Standing in our bedroom, I surveyed the ghost of our marriage. His dresser drawers half empty. The bathroom counter missing his electric razor. The closet with gaps where his suits once hung. I stripped the bed completely, bundling the sheets for donation. Some things couldn't be washed clean. The divorce proceedings began with clinical efficiency, a benefit of being an attorney with connections throughout Chicago's legal system. I secured Margaret Holloway, a legendary divorce lawyer known for her ruthless effectiveness, especially in cases involving infidelity. "You've done my job for me," Margaret remarked, reviewing my meticulous evidence files during our first meeting. "Most clients bring me suspicions. You've brought me a complete case." Lincoln hired Stanley Roth, a smooth-talking attorney from his firm's network. Their first offer was almost insulting. Lincoln would keep the condo, I would get a cash settlement, and we'd go our separate ways quietly. "He's concerned about your career," Stanley explained with practiced sincerity during mediation. "Publicity around the circumstances might damage your professional reputation." Margaret's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "My client has time-stamped video evidence of your client's infidelity in their marital home. Would he prefer we present that in open court?" The next offer was considerably more reasonable. 3 months into the separation, I received an unexpected lunch invitation from Easton. We met at a quiet restaurant away from the legal district, where he sat waiting with a glass of ice water and the same grave expression he'd worn on the bench for 30 years. "Lincoln has been removed from the Mitchell Brewery's account," he said after we ordered, cutting straight to the point as always. "They were one of his biggest clients." I nodded, unsurprised. The industry is small. Word gets around. "It wasn't gossip that cost him the account," Easton replied, meeting my gaze directly. "It was me. I've known James Mitchell for 40 years. Golf buddies. When I told him what happened, what my son did to you, he pulled the account immediately. The revelation should have brought satisfaction, but I felt only a hollow ache." "You didn't have to do that." "I did," Easton countered firmly. "Actions have consequences. Lincoln seems to have forgotten that somewhere along the way." He reached across the table, his large hand covering mine briefly. "You're still family to us, Bella. That doesn't change because my son failed you." The unexpected support from my soon-to-be ex-in-laws became one of the stranger aspects of the divorce. Hazel called weekly not to plead Lincoln's case but to check on my well-being. Easton's connections in the legal world subtly cleared paths that might otherwise have been blocked to me. Their loyalty, even as their son's life unraveled, was a testament to their character. 6 months after the anniversary dinner, the divorce was finalized. I kept the condo, my retirement accounts, and received a settlement that acknowledged Lincoln's betrayal without publicly humiliating him. The day I signed the papers, I walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in years. That evening, I stood in my living room, mine alone now, and took stock of the space. Every piece of furniture held memories. The sofa where we'd watched movies, the dining table that had witnessed our final confrontation, the walls that had been silent witnesses to his betrayals. The next day I called a realtor. Moving into a bright, airy apartment overlooking the Chicago River marked the beginning of my truly independent life. I filled it with furniture I chose alone, arranged according to my preferences without compromise. The freedom to make decisions, from the color of bath towels to weekend plans, without considering another person's opinions, was intoxicating. At work, my reputation shifted from Lincoln Thomas's wife to simply Bella, the attorney who handled the Henderson acquisition with exceptional skill, who never missed a filing deadline despite personal turmoil, who maintained professional composure when facing opposing counsel who happened to be her ex-husband's college roommate. 1 year after the divorce, Lincoln's professional decline became common knowledge in our circles. The Mitchell account was just the beginning. Easton's quiet withdrawal of support, from introductions to country club memberships to holiday party invitations, systematically disconnected Lincoln from the network that had buoyed his career for years. Caroline left the agency 6 weeks after our divorce was finalized. According to office gossip, she'd moved to Denver with a pharmaceutical sales representative she'd met at a conference. I ran into Lincoln only once at a charity gala I attended with colleagues. He looked older, subdued. We exchanged polite nods across the room, two strangers who once shared everything. "Are you okay?" Megan whispered, noticing the exchange. I considered the question carefully, searching for any lingering pain or regret. Finding none, I smiled genuinely. "I'm better than okay," I replied and meant it. Standing there in my carefully chosen dress, surrounded by colleagues who respected me for my work rather than my marital status, I recognized the woman I'd become. Not a victim of betrayal, not an extension of someone else's identity, but entirely my own person. Stronger for having survived the collapse of the perfect illusion I'd lived within. The marriage had ended, but I had not. That, perhaps, was the most valuable lesson from the ruins. Life continues, rebuilds, and sometimes emerges more authentic than before the destruction. The perfect illusion had shattered, revealing something far more valuable in its place. Reality, strength, freedom, and finally peace. If Bella's journey from heartbreak to healing touched your heart, please subscribe. These stories of women reclaiming their power deserve to be shared. One subscription means one more person remembering they're worth fighting for, even if that means fighting alone first. Thank you for being here. On my wedding day, my stepsister ran in screaming, "Stop the wedding. He belongs to me." My fiancé looked at her and then turned to me, expecting me to break down. But instead I smiled and said, "I was waiting for this moment." Then I pulled out a letter that made everyone gasp. I'd always known Madison would try to steal my happiness. She'd been rehearsing for this moment since the day I got engaged. What she didn't know was that I'd been preparing too, and her own words were about to become her undoing. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. If you're enjoying these stories of empowerment, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us build this amazing community. Let's dive in. Growing up with Madison Blake Clark wasn't just challenging, it was an education in survival. From the moment her father Robert married my mother Diana, Madison made it her mission to take everything I cherished. At first it was small things, borrowing my favorite sweater only to accidentally ruin it, or telling my friends about embarrassing moments that never actually happened. But as we got older, her games became more calculated, more cruel. During college, she dated not one but 3 of my boyfriends, waiting until things got serious before swooping in with her perfectly practiced damsel in distress routine. Each time she'd flash that innocent smile and say, "It just happened, Eve. You can't blame love, can you?" But everything changed the night I met Alexander Winchester III at the Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala. I was there representing my company. He was the evening's keynote speaker. Madison had been invited but called in sick at the last minute, something she'd regret for years to come. When Alex and I connected over our shared passion for educational reform, neither of us could have predicted how the night would unfold. The first diary appeared 3 months after our engagement. I'd gone to Mother's house to help with spring cleaning when I found it tucked behind Madison's old vanity, a plain black leather journal filled with pages of her increasingly obsessive thoughts. "Alex deserves someone who understands his world," she'd written. "Eve's just a charity case who got lucky. I've seen how he looks at me during family dinners. He knows he chose wrong." I didn't confront her then. Instead I watched, waited, and discovered more. Each new diary revealed darker intentions, detailed plans, and a fantasy world where she and Alex lived the perfect life she believed she deserved. My stepsister wasn't just jealous, she was unraveling. My best friend Olivia thought I should expose Madison immediately, but I knew better. "Let her plan," I told Olivia one afternoon over coffee. "Every word she writes is another nail in her own coffin." The wedding preparations became Madison's stage. As maid of honor, her idea, not mine, she attended every fitting, tasting, and planning session. While she played the supportive sister in public, her diaries told a different story. She'd write for hours about how the Vera Wang dress should have been hers, how she could better handle Alex's family wealth, how she'd redecorate the Winchester estate once she'd saved Alex from his mistake. I kept Alex informed of everything. He was shocked at first. The Madison he knew seemed so sweet, so caring. But as I showed him diary after diary, he understood. Together we created a plan. We let her overhear false wedding details, watched her scramble to adjust her schemes, and waited for her to dig herself deeper. The day before the wedding, I found her final diary entry. "Tomorrow everything changes," she'd written. "I've practiced my speech 100 times. The red dress is perfect. It'll make sure all eyes are on me. Eve thinks she's won, but she has no idea what's coming. By this time tomorrow, Alex will finally be mine." So when those cathedral doors burst open and Madison strode in wearing that carefully chosen red dress, I didn't flinch. When she screamed about true love and destiny, I didn't cry. And when Alex turned to me with practiced concern, I simply smiled and reached for the letter I'd prepared, a carefully curated collection of her most damning diary entries. The gasps echoed through the cathedral as I read excerpts of her own words aloud. Madison's face transformed from triumphant to horrified as she recognized her private thoughts being broadcast to 500 of Boston's finest. Her mask cracked, then shattered completely when I reached the final entry, the one detailing exactly how she'd planned to destroy my wedding day. She ran from the cathedral, mascara streaming down her face, leaving behind the wreckage of her own making. Mother tried to follow, but I gently stopped her. "She made her choice," I said softly. "Now she has to live with it." Alex squeezed my hand as we turned back to the officiant. The ceremony continued, more beautiful for having survived its trial by fire. Later, during our first dance, Alex whispered, "I never doubted you for a second." I looked over his shoulder at the empty table where Madison should have been sitting. "I know," I replied. "That's exactly why she never stood a chance." The weeks following my wedding revealed the true depth of Madison's obsession. While I honeymooned in the Maldives with Alex, she spiraled further into her carefully constructed fantasy world, one that became painfully clear as more of her diaries surfaced. Looking back, our parallel lives had always been a study in contrast. We shared the same elegant colonial home after our parents married, but while I spent nights studying under my desk lamp, Madison posed before her mirror, practicing society smiles. When I launched my tech startup, she launched Instagram stories about luxury lifestyle tips. Our paths diverged but remained inexplicably tangled. The diary entries from her teenage years were almost innocent in their jealousy. "Eve got into Harvard today," she'd written. "Daddy says Yale is just as good, but everyone knows Harvard's more prestigious. She probably only got in because of her sob story about losing her father." Each page dripped with similar petty resentments, cataloging every perceived slight and advantage. But it was her observations about wealth that truly revealed her character. While I built my company from the ground up, Madison cultivated an expertise in designer labels and luxury experiences, all funded by her father's guilt-driven generosity. "Eve doesn't understand old money," one entry sneered. "She thinks success is about spreadsheets and innovations. But I know what really matters: the right connections, the right image, the right life." The day I met Alex at the charity gala became an obsession in her diaries. Pages upon pages dissected every detail she'd heard secondhand: how I wore a basic blue gown while she lay in bed with a convenient flu, how Alex and I connected over our shared passion for educational technology, how the evening should have been her triumph. "Eve doesn't deserve him," she'd scrawled frantically. "She can't appreciate what it means to be a Winchester. I grew up understanding wealth, learning the social graces she'll never master. Alex needs someone who belongs in his world. Someone like me." The wedding planning became her personal torment. Each diary entry from that period reads like a study in delusional thinking. She'd sketch herself in my wedding gown, practice signing Madison Winchester in flowing script, and detail elaborate scenarios where Alex would realize his mistake. Her maid of honor role became a front-row seat to what she viewed as an elaborate charade. "Watched Eve stumble through another etiquette lesson today," she wrote after a formal dinner with Alex's family. "She used the wrong fork for her salad, but everyone pretended not to notice. They're too polite to admit what a mistake Alex is making. But I see the way his mother Victoria winces at Eve's common manners. I could save them all from this embarrassment." What Madison never realized was that her precious diary entries about my social faux pas only endeared me further to the Winchesters. Victoria herself came across one of the journals Madison had accidentally left in the family estate's library. Instead of being horrified by my alleged missteps, Alex's mother was appalled by Madison's obsessive documentation of them. Your stepsister, Victoria told me over tea one afternoon, seems to have forgotten that true grace lies in making others feel comfortable, not in counting their mistakes. Coming from Boston's reigning social queen, this validation meant everything. The final diary, the one that sealed Madison's fate, revealed her plan to save Alex from our marriage. She detailed everything: the red dress chosen to outshine my wedding gown, the tearful speech practiced 100 times, even the exact moment she'd make her dramatic entrance. Everyone will see it's meant to be, she'd written. All those society magazines will call it Boston's greatest love story. Instead, those same magazines ran very different headlines. Wedding interrupted. Diary reveals desperate plot became the talk of the social season. Madison fled to Europe, unable to face the humiliation of having her own words exposed to the very society she'd tried so desperately to impress. Mother still forwards her occasional emails, postcards from Paris, photos from Milan, each one carefully curated to show she's thriving. But her latest diary, discovered in her abandoned apartment and forwarded by her former roommate, tells a different story. They'll never understand, she wrote. I could have been everything Eve pretends to be. I knew the rules, played the game, did everything right. So why does she keep winning? The answer, of course, was simple. I never played her game at all. While Madison crafted elaborate schemes in her diaries, I built a life based on something real. Alex and I recently launched an educational technology foundation, bringing innovative learning tools to underserved communities. It's not the society life Madison dreamed of, but it's something far more valuable. It's authentic. Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever understand that her own words set me free. Those diaries didn't just expose her plot. They released me from a lifetime of walking on eggshells. In trying to write herself into my story, Madison finally wrote herself out of it completely. 6 months after the wedding, a mysterious package arrived at our doorstep. Inside, I found another of Madison's diaries, this one sent by her former therapist, Dr. Sarah Bennett, who'd broken confidentiality after discovering the disturbing extent of my stepsister's obsession. The diary's pages revealed a methodical investigation I'd never known about. Madison had hired private investigators to track my daily routines, paid off service staff at Alex's favorite restaurants to report our conversations, and even attempted to hack my business emails. Each entry meticulously documented her findings like a detective's case file, but with a disturbing personal twist. Eve's schedule is predictable, she'd written. Coffee at La Maison at 7:15 a.m., office by 8. She thinks being punctual makes her professional, but it just makes her boring. Alex deserves someone spontaneous, someone exciting. Someone like me. Dr. Bennett's accompanying letter explained how Madison had spent their sessions not seeking help, but instead justifying her actions. I'm protecting Alex, she'd insist. Eve's fooled everyone with her self-made success story, but I know she's just using him for his money and connections. I have proof. The proof filled dozens of pages, innocent business meetings twisted into suspected affairs, charitable donations portrayed as tax schemes, and routine phone calls transformed into elaborate conspiracies. My stepsister hadn't just been planning to stop a wedding. She'd been building an entire false narrative about my life. What struck me most was the detailed timeline she'd created, counting down to my wedding day. Each entry became increasingly frantic as the date approached. 90 days until I save Alex. Ordered the red dress today. It's perfect for making a dramatic entrance. The color symbolizes passion, love, destiny. Eve's boring white dress won't stand a chance. 60 days left. Practice my speech again. Stop the wedding. He belongs to me. The mirror says I'm getting better at the tears. They need to look real for maximum impact. 30 days to go. Overheard Eve discussing seating arrangements. I'll position myself perfectly, 3rd row left side. The acoustics in the cathedral will carry my voice to every corner. Everyone will remember this moment. But it was the final entry, dated just hours before the wedding, that truly chilled me. Dear diary, by the time I write in you again, everything will be different. I've memorized every detail. The exact moment to stand, the precise words to say, the perfect expression of desperate love. Eve thinks she knows what's coming, but she has no idea. After today, Alex will finally see the truth, and I'll have everything I deserve. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. Madison had been right about one thing. I had known what was coming. But her obsession with creating the perfect dramatic moment had blinded her to the fact that she was writing her own downfall, one diary entry at a time. Alex took the discovery of this latest diary harder than I did. She wasn't just trying to stop our wedding, he said, pacing our library one evening. She was trying to destroy your reputation, your credibility, everything you've built. I placed the diary alongside the others we'd collected, a disturbing chronicle of obsession now safely locked away in our home. But she failed, I reminded him. Because she was so focused on writing about destroying my life, she never actually lived her own. Dr. Bennett's professional assessment confirmed what we'd suspected. Madison's jealousy had evolved into an elaborate fantasy world where she was the hero of a story that existed only in her diaries. Each entry reinforced her delusions, creating a spiral of obsession that ultimately led to her public downfall. The most recent updates from Europe suggest Madison has finally begun real therapy. Mother says she's showing signs of genuine reflection, though the path to healing will be long. Her last postcard, unlike the previous carefully curated messages, simply read, "I'm sorry. I'm getting help." Sometimes late at night I revisit those diaries, not out of anger or triumph, but as a reminder of how easily obsession can consume a life. Madison spent years writing about destroying my happiness, but in doing so she only documented her own unraveling. The final page of her last diary remains the most poignant. Beneath her detailed plans for wedding disruption, written in a shaky hand, was a single line she probably never meant anyone to read. Why can't I just be happy for her? That question, more than any of her elaborate schemes or accusations, reveals the true tragedy of Madison's story. In trying to write herself into my life, she forgot to live her own. Her diaries became both her weapon and her prison, a paper trail that ultimately led not to the triumph she imagined, but to the help she truly needed. A year into our marriage, Alex and I decided to renovate the east wing of the Winchester estate. During the cleanup, we discovered something unexpected behind a false panel in Madison's old room, a hidden cache of diaries dating back to our childhood. These weren't like her other journals. These were her raw, unfiltered thoughts, never meant to be found. The discovery coincided perfectly with my plan. For months, I'd been strategically feeding Madison false information through our family network. Each carefully planted detail about Alex's and my supposed marital troubles reached her like breadcrumbs, leading her exactly where I wanted her to go. "Eve's business is struggling," Mother would casually mention during their weekly calls. "She's been asking Alex for investment capital." Or Olivia would deliberately let slip at social gatherings that Alex and I were sleeping in separate bedrooms. Each piece of misinformation found its way into Madison's new diary entries, which her former roommate Charlotte faithfully forwarded to me. The setup was meticulous. I made sure to be seen arguing with Alex in public places where Madison's remaining society friends would witness it. We scheduled separate vacation plans, dropped hints about couples counseling, and let rumors circulate about potential divorce attorneys being consulted. Madison took the bait completely. Her latest diary entries vibrated with renewed hope. "Eve's finally showing her true colors. Alex must see now what a mistake he made. Their marriage is crumbling exactly as I predicted. Soon he'll realize I was right all along." What she didn't know was that every move was orchestrated. Alex and I were never stronger, our public arguments, carefully scripted performances. The separate vacations were business trips coordinated to align with our expansion plans. Even the couples counseling rumors were part of a charity initiative we'd launched for relationship wellness. Victoria Winchester, Alex's mother, proved an unexpected ally in our scheme. "Madison never understood that real society isn't about being seen," she remarked one afternoon over tea. "It's about seeing through others' facades." She helped us plant several key pieces of misinformation through her extensive social network. The hidden childhood diaries revealed something crucial: Madison's first attempts to imitate my life. Pages filled with copied homework assignments, traced signatures, even lists of my favorite things with notes on how to make them her own. This pattern of mimicry had started long before her obsession with Alex. We waited until the perfect moment to spring our trap. At the annual Winchester Foundation Gala, we knew Madison would make her move. She'd been writing frantically about her triumphant return to society for weeks. Her diary detailed every aspect from her designer gown to the exact moment she'd approach Alex. The evening unfolded exactly as planned. Madison arrived looking radiant, carefully timing her entrance for maximum impact. She circulated gracefully, gathering sympathy with carefully crafted hints about her emotional recovery abroad. Then, just as her diary had predicted, she approached Alex during a quiet moment on the terrace. What she didn't expect was my presence around the corner, or the stack of her childhood diaries in my hands. As she began her practice speech about understanding and forgiveness, I stepped forward. Looking for something familiar, Madison? Something to copy, perhaps? The color drained from her face as I began reading entries from her hidden diaries, decades of attempted identity theft laid bare. Each page revealed her systematic attempts to become me, long before Alex entered our lives. Her sophisticated society mask cracked completely when I reached the entries about practicing my handwriting, memorizing my mannerisms, even using my old perfume. "You never wanted Alex," I said softly, closing the final diary. "You wanted my life, and he was just the latest piece you tried to take." The gathered crowd of Boston's elite witnessed her second public unraveling, but this time there was no dramatic exit. Instead, Madison sank into a nearby chair, all pretense abandoned. "How did you always know?" she whispered. "Because you wrote everything down," I replied. "Every plan, every scheme, every attempt to become me. The only thing you never wrote was your own story." This time, when Madison left Boston, it wasn't in disgrace but in defeat. The childhood diaries had exposed something far deeper than jealousy. They revealed a lifetime of trying to live someone else's life instead of creating her own. Alex wrapped his arm around me as we watched her car disappear down the winding driveway. "Do you think she'll ever find herself?" I tucked the last diary into my evening bag, finally closing this chapter of our lives. "She has to stop writing about others first. Some stories need to end before new ones can begin." 2 years after the gala incident, Madison's digital footprint began telling a new story. Her once pristine Instagram feed, carefully curated to mirror my life, transformed into something unexpectedly authentic. Gone were the posed photos at luxury venues and calculated recreations of my business milestones. Instead, she started sharing glimpses of a simpler life in a small town outside Paris. Charlotte, who still maintained occasional contact with her, forwarded me Madison's latest diary, this one different from all the others. Instead of leather-bound elegance, it was a simple notebook filled with watercolor sketches and reflections on her art therapy sessions. "I spent so many years trying to be Eve," she'd written, "that I forgot who Madison was supposed to be. Today, I painted my first original piece without checking anyone else's social media for inspiration. It's messy and imperfect, but it's mine." The transformation wasn't instantaneous or complete. Some entries still revealed old habits. Saw Eve's new tech company expansion announcement. For a moment I started planning, but then I picked up my paintbrush instead. Progress, it seemed, came in small strokes. Alex noticed the change first in the family holiday cards. Madison's annual carefully staged photos were replaced by candid shots of her teaching art to children at a local community center. "She's finally writing her own story," he observed, studying the genuine smile that had replaced her practiced society grin. Mother began sharing more frequent updates about Madison's new life. She'd rented a tiny studio apartment above a bakery, far from the luxury condos she once insisted were essential. Her new diary entries focused on morning conversations with the elderly baker below, the changing colors of sane sunsets, and the liberation of creating without competition. "I found one of my old diaries today," she wrote. "Pages and pages about Eve's success, Alex's wealth, the life I thought I deserved. It feels like reading about a stranger. Someone so consumed by another person's story that she forgot to live at all." The real breakthrough came when Madison started her own small business. Not a glossy tech startup like mine, but a cozy art therapy studio helping others find their authentic voice through creativity. Her diary entries now filled with stories of her students' breakthroughs rather than schemes for social climbing. "Today, a young girl reminded me of myself," one entry read. "She kept looking at other students' paintings, trying to copy their style. I showed her my old diary entries, my own journey from imitation to authenticity. For the first time, I felt grateful for my past, not because of what I gained, but because of what I could teach others about losing yourself in someone else's life. Victoria Winchester, who had once been Madison's harshest critic, surprised everyone by commissioning a series of paintings for the Winchester Foundation's new youth center. True grace, she told me, lies in recognizing genuine transformation. Madison's work, abstract expressions of personal growth, now hangs in the very halls where she once plotted her social ascension. The most telling change appeared in her latest diary's opening page. Instead of the usual property of Madison Blake Clark with practiced flourishes mimicking my signature, she'd simply written, "These are my words, my journey, my truth. No imitations needed." During a rare family dinner when Madison visited Boston, the contrast between past and present was striking. Gone was the designer wardrobe and calculated charm. Instead, she wore paint-stained jeans and spoke passionately about her students' progress. When conversation turned to my recent business success, she listened with genuine interest rather than barely concealed envy. "I owe you an apology," she told me later that evening, pulling out her current diary. "Not just for the wedding or Alex or all the schemes, but for something bigger, for trying to steal your essence instead of finding my own." She opened to a recent entry. "Today I realized success isn't about having someone else's life. It's about living your own so fully that imitation never crosses your mind." Alex squeezed my hand under the table as Madison shared her plans to expand her art therapy program. Her eyes sparkled with authentic passion rather than calculated ambition. The diary on the table wasn't a weapon or a blueprint for manipulation. It had become a genuine chronicle of personal growth. As we said goodbye, Madison hugged me without any of her old artificial warmth. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me that the best stories are the ones we write for ourselves." Watching her cab disappear into the Boston night, I realized that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in exposing someone's plots. It's in helping them find their own path to redemption, one honest diary entry at a time. 3 years into Madison's transformation, an unexpected package arrived at our Boston home. Inside, I found a leather-bound album, not another diary, but a carefully curated collection of newspaper clippings, photographs, and handwritten notes documenting both our journeys. Madison had titled it, "The Stories We Choose." The album began with the infamous wedding headlines, "Socialite's Wedding Disruption Backfires," and "Diary Revelations Shock Boston Elite." But as pages turned, the narrative shifted. Recent articles featured Madison's expanding art therapy program, highlighted her work with traumatized youth, and showcased the growing success of her Paris studio. "I kept every piece," she wrote in an accompanying letter, "not as a reminder of my shame, but as proof that people can change their stories." Each clipping shows 2 paths, the one I almost destroyed myself trying to follow and the one I finally found for myself. Alex studied the album with particular interest in the business section clippings. Side by side, they told parallel tales. My tech company's expansion alongside Madison's art therapy centers opening across Europe. "These aren't competing narratives anymore," he observed. "They're complementary chapters in different books." The most touching inclusion was a series of diary excerpts she'd chosen to share, not the obsessive schemes of before, but honest reflections on her journey. "Today I helped a teenager work through her own comparison anxiety," one entry read. As she painted her feelings, I saw my old self in her brushstrokes, always measuring, always falling short. But now I could offer something I never had: permission to be beautifully, imperfectly original. Victoria Winchester, upon seeing the album, suggested displaying it at the upcoming Winchester Foundation Charity Gala. "This isn't just about Madison's redemption," she explained. "It's about showing others trapped in lives of comparison that there's another way." The album's later pages revealed something extraordinary: collaborative projects between Madison's art therapy program and my tech company's educational initiatives. Without either of us planning it, our paths had naturally converged in a way her previous scheming never could have achieved. "Remember how I used to track your every move?" Madison wrote. "Now my students use your educational software to document their artistic progress. Life has a strange way of writing better plots than we could ever plan." Mother wept when she saw the final page's photos of Madison's newest venture, a retreat center for women struggling with identity and self-worth issues. The location? The same French countryside estate where she'd fled after the wedding incident. She'd transformed her place of exile into a sanctuary for healing. Charlotte, now a regular guest teacher at Madison's studio, contributed her own note to the album. I watched my best friend lose herself trying to become someone else. Now I watch her help others find themselves through art. Some stories do have happy endings, just not the ones we originally plotted. During our next family gathering, Madison presented me with a special addition to the album, a joint interview we'd given to a prominent women's magazine. The headline read, "Stepsister Rivalry to Revolutionary Partnership. How Two Women Turned Conflict into Creation." "I wanted you to have this," Madison said, carefully placing the article in the album. "Not because it's about us, but because it might help someone else stuck in the comparison trap I lived in. Every story of transformation gives permission for another to begin." Alex wrapped an arm around each of us as we flipped through the completed album. "You both wrote exactly the stories you were meant to tell," he said. "Just not in the order anyone expected." The album's final page held a simple watercolor painting, two paths starting from the same point, diverging through tumultuous terrain, then meeting again at a higher elevation. Beneath it, Madison had written, "Sometimes the longest road to finding yourself leads through someone else's life. The trick is knowing when to turn back and blaze your own trail." Looking at our collected history, I realized that revenge had never been the right ending for our story. The real conclusion wasn't in exposed diaries or public humiliation, it was in the genuine growth that followed. Madison hadn't just changed her narrative, she'd helped rewrite the ending for both of us. As we closed the album, Madison squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she said, "for giving me the wake-up call I needed to start my own story." In that moment, I understood that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well enough to inspire your former enemy to do the same. The story came full circle during the 5th anniversary celebration of Madison's first art therapy center. The event, held in a renovated Parisian warehouse, drew an unexpected mix of guests. Boston socialites mingled with art students, tech entrepreneurs chatted with therapy clients, and family members once divided by Madison's schemes, united in celebration of her genuine success. In the center of the main gallery hung a striking installation. Madison's old diaries, transformed into origami cranes, suspended from the ceiling in a spiraling pattern. Each diary page visible through the delicate folds showed fragments of her journey, from obsession to liberation, from imitation to authenticity. "I wanted them here," Madison explained to the gathered crowd, "because every story of healing begins with acknowledging our past chapters. These diaries once documented my attempts to steal someone else's life. Now they float above us, transformed into symbols of flight and freedom." Alex and I watched as she guided visitors through the exhibition. Her newest diary entries, enlarged and displayed alongside student artwork, revealed the depth of her transformation. "Today's breakthrough came from an unexpected source," one read. "A client asked why I stopped keeping revenge journals. I realized I don't need them anymore. Living authentically is the best revenge against your former self." Victoria Winchester, now a devoted patron of the arts therapy program, stood before a particularly powerful piece, a collaborative mural created by Madison's students, each section depicting their own journeys from imitation to authenticity. "You've done more than find yourself," she told Madison. "You've created a path for others to do the same." The evening's centerpiece was the unveiling of a joint venture between our companies, a digital platform combining my educational technology with Madison's art therapy techniques. The project, born from our shared experiences, would help others trapped in cycles of comparison and self-doubt. 5 years ago, Madison addressed the audience, "I stood in a cathedral, trying to steal my stepsister's happiness. Today I stand before you having found something far more valuable, my own path. And the woman I once tried to replace? She's now my strongest ally in helping others find their authentic voices." Mother, watching from the front row, dabbed at her eyes as Madison continued. "These diary pages once mapped my obsession with someone else's life. Now they're reminders that the most beautiful stories are the ones we write for ourselves, not the ones we try to copy from others." Charlotte, who had supported Madison's transformation from the beginning, unveiled a surprise, a bound collection of success stories from the Art Therapy Center's first 5 years. "From Madison, I learned that true friendship isn't about keeping secrets," she said. "It's about helping each other discover our own truths." The evening concluded with a symbolic ceremony. Madison invited each guest to write down something they needed to release. A comparison, a jealousy, an imitation of someone else's life. One by one, these notes were folded into paper boats and set afloat in the courtyard fountain, carrying away old patterns to make room for authentic stories. As the last paper boat drifted across the water, Madison turned to me. "Do you remember what you said at your wedding when I tried to stop it? I've been waiting for this moment. You knew even then that exposure wasn't about revenge. It was about forcing me to finally see myself." Alex joined us by the fountain, where the paper boats had gathered in a gentle constellation of released burdens. "Both of you wrote exactly the stories you were meant to tell," he observed. "Just not in the order anyone expected." Looking at the transformed diary pages floating above us and the healing ripples spreading through the fountain below, I realized our story had evolved into something neither of us could have planned. Madison hadn't just reformed, she'd revolutionized her pain into purpose, turning her cautionary tale into a beacon of hope for others. "The best revenge," Madison wrote in her latest diary entry, displayed prominently by the exit, "isn't in exposing someone's darkness. It's in helping them find their light. Eve didn't just stop my wedding disruption, she started my journey home to myself." Sometimes the people we try to destroy become the ones who save us from our own destructive stories. As guests departed into the Parisian night, carrying pieces of transformed wisdom with them, Madison and I stood together under her canopy of origami cranes. Each diary page-turned wing caught the light differently, casting shadows that danced like the complex patterns of human growth and redemption. "Ready to write the next chapter?" I asked her. Madison smiled, touching one of the floating cranes. "Yes," she replied. "But this time I'm writing it in my own voice." The 6th year marked a new chapter when Madison discovered an old USB drive while cleaning her Paris studio. It contained something unexpected. Video diaries from the months leading up to my wedding. Watching them transformed our understanding of her journey in ways the written diaries never could. Day 89 before the wedding, Madison's younger self spoke to the camera, rehearsing her planned disruption with almost theatrical precision. "The key is to make the tears look natural. Eve always had that perfect vulnerable look. The one that got her everything. Today I practiced for 6 hours in front of the mirror." The videos progressively revealed a descent we hadn't fully grasped from her written words alone. Hours of footage showed her practicing my mannerisms, mimicking my speech patterns, even attempting to copy my business presentation style. The obsession had been more complete than anyone realized. "Found another video," she wrote in her current diary. "I was trying to replicate Eve's TED Talk gestures. Watching it now feels like witnessing a stranger's breakdown. The scariest part? I thought I was being strategic. I didn't realize I was erasing myself." Alex and I sat with Madison in her therapy studio, viewing selected clips she felt ready to share. The most haunting was dated the night before our wedding. Madison, dressed in her red dress, delivering her planned speech to an empty room, over and over until dawn broke. "I needed you both to see these," Madison explained, her hands steady as she closed the laptop. "Not for more apologies, but because these videos are becoming part of our therapy program. Watching myself lose myself, it's helping others recognize their own patterns of identity loss." Victoria Winchester, upon viewing portions of the footage, proposed something unprecedented. A documentary about transformation. Not focused on the scandal but on the deeper journey from obsession to authenticity. "These videos aren't just about Madison anymore," she observed. "They're about everyone who's ever tried to live someone else's life." The documentary project unveiled layers we hadn't expected. Former society friends came forward with their own stories of pretense and performance. Charlotte revealed footage she'd shot of Madison during their college years, showing early signs of her identity struggle. Looking at these old videos, Madison wrote in her latest diary entry, "I realize my greatest performance wasn't at Eve's wedding. It was every day before that, pretending I didn't need to find my own path. The red dress moment wasn't my breakdown, it was my breakthrough." Mother found it difficult to watch the footage at first, seeing the depth of Madison's struggle displayed so rawly. But during a private screening of the documentary Rough Cut, she grasped her daughter's vision. "You're not just exposing your past," she told Madison. "You're illuminating a path for others." The most powerful segment featured split-screen comparisons. Madison's practiced imitations beside footage of her current art therapy sessions. The contrast between her former rehearsed perfection and present authentic passion told the story better than words ever could. During the documentary's final editing sessions, Madison added something unexpected: recent video diaries showing her work with clients. "Today we don't practice being perfect," she told a group of young women. "We practice being present, being real, being ourselves." Alex, watching the final cut, noted how the story had evolved beyond revenge or redemption. "This isn't just about what happened at our wedding anymore," he reflected. "It's about the universal struggle between authenticity and imitation." The documentary premiered at Madison's Art Therapy Center, where the origami crane installation still danced overhead. But now, projected on the walls behind the paper birds, ran loops of Madison's transformation, from the practiced tears of her wedding planning to the genuine joy of her current work. "These videos were my last masks," Madison addressed the premiere audience. "I kept them hidden because I thought they showed my weakness. Now I understand they show something more valuable. They show that change is possible. That no matter how lost you become in someone else's story, you can always find your way back to your own." As the credits rolled, Madison opened her current diary and read her latest entry. "The cameras caught my performance, but they also captured my liberation. Every practiced smile, every rehearsed word was a step toward the moment I finally became real." Sometimes you have to see yourself at your most inauthentic to find your truest self. The evening ended with Madison unveiling her newest project, a video diary workshop where clients could document their own journeys from imitation to authenticity. "Because sometimes," she explained, "you need to watch yourself disappear before you can find your way back." Looking at the frozen frames of Madison's past self practicing her wedding disruption, contrasted with the confident woman now helping others heal, I realized that even the darkest documentation of obsession could become a powerful tool for transformation. Her video diaries, like the written ones before them, had evolved from weapons into wisdom. 7 years after the wedding, Madison's documentary unexpectedly went viral. The story resonated far beyond our family circle, touching millions who recognized their own struggles with authenticity in her journey. But it was a simple leather-bound book arriving at our Boston home that marked the true culmination of our story. Final pages read the embossed cover. Inside, Madison had handwritten her last diary entry alongside photographs documenting every phase of our shared history. The entry began, "Dear Eve, this is the last diary I'll ever write about you because it's time to close this chapter completely." The pages that followed weren't filled with her usual introspection or therapy insights. Instead, Madison had compiled letters from people whose lives had been touched by our story. Women who'd abandoned their own wedding-crashing plans, students who'd stopped measuring themselves against others' success, and therapy clients who'd found their authentic voices. "Your revenge wasn't in exposing my diary at the wedding," Madison wrote. "It was in forcing me to finally read my own words and see what I'd become. Now others are reading their own stories differently because of what happened that day." Alex found me in our library, tears falling onto the final pages. "She's really done it, hasn't she?" he said softly. "She's turned your moment of revenge into a movement of redemption." Victoria Winchester had already received her copy of the book. Her note to Madison, included in the final pages, read, "You've proven that true grace isn't in hiding our darkest chapters, but in transforming them into light for others." The most powerful inclusion was a photograph taken moments after my wedding confrontation, Madison in her red dress, mascara streaking her cheeks, holding the exposed diary. Beside it, a recent photo showed her in her art therapy studio, surrounded by clients writing their own stories of transformation. The caption read, "Sometimes our worst moments become our best teachers." Mother's contribution to the final pages surprised us all. She'd kept a diary of her own during those tumultuous years. Her entries revealed the pain of watching one daughter try to become the other, and the joy of finally seeing both living authentically. "My greatest failure," she wrote, "was in not showing Madison that she was enough exactly as she was." Charlotte contributed the last photograph, a candid shot of Madison and me at her therapy center's opening, both laughing at something long forgotten. "This," she wrote beneath it, "is what happens when we stop trying to steal stories and start writing our own." The book's final entry came with an unexpected proposal. Madison had designed a new program combining her art therapy with my tech company's resources. Written in light, a platform helping people document their journeys from imitation to authenticity. She wanted us to launch it together, transforming our past conflict into future collaboration. 7 years ago, I tried to steal your happy ending, Madison concluded. Instead, you gave me something better, the courage to write my own. This diary isn't an ending at all. It's an invitation to others to start their own stories. Alex found me still reading in the early hours of morning. You know what's remarkable, he observed. Your revenge could have destroyed her. Instead, it gave her and now countless others a new beginning. The next day, I sent Madison my response, not in a diary but in a simple note. Let's write this next chapter together. Looking at her final diary in our library, now shelved alongside the ones that once documented her obsession, I realized that revenge had never been the end goal. The real story wasn't in the wedding confrontation or even in Madison's transformation. It was in how a single moment of truth could ripple outward, touching lives we'd never even imagined. Madison's last written words captured it perfectly. In trying to become my stepsister, I lost myself. In failing to steal her story, I found my own. Sometimes the greatest plot twist isn't in what we take from others, but in what we finally give ourselves permission to become. And so our story, which began with a wedding disruption and a revealed diary, evolved into something far more powerful than revenge. It became a beacon for others looking to find their own voice, their own path, their own authentic tale to tell. Perhaps that's the most unexpected twist of all. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in destroying someone's story, but in helping them write a better one.